My favorite deck in all of Pokemon Pocket has been the Gyarados EX Chatot deck. Gyarados EX is a surprisingly powerful card that can deal 140 damage and can sometimes lock the opponent out of their win con by denying their energies on the field when it can randomly discard energy. And having 100 HP or 180 HP means it survives all the thresholds, which is like Mewtwo or Pikachu, which makes it really, really bulky, especially on a stage 1. And so I found that my favorite partner for this is this Chatot right here, which allows you to shuffle your hand into the deck and then draw as many cards as your opponent has. And so we end up playing a lot of these cards like XP, Pokeball, and two sets of fossils. That allows us to like play these cards out, discard a hand down to one, and then Chatot and maybe draw 4 to 5 cards. I think this deck has pretty solid matchups and everything. I mean, I took it to the 5 emblem event win streak, and I won all 5 of my matches immediately, which is better than what I did last time, where it took me 3 tries. But yeah, I think this deck catches a lot of people off guard because they're not expecting to, have to play around their hand size. If they can't dump their hand, or like they don't want to play their oaks or whatever, then you're getting more value out of that because they're delaying their setup time. So in most cases, it's a lose-lose for the opponent, unless they're also playing a very similar deck like this, or something very aggro. I do think Pikachu is probably your worst matchup, next to maybe Charizard. I found that Charizard can be a little bit difficult sometimes, but otherwise, like, I think this deck is super solid. Yeah, and I just wanted to play this deck before the next set gives us Mars. And this whole strategy could get a little ruined by, Mars turning your 5-6 card hand into a 3 card hand again. If you guys enjoy the Pocket content, make sure to let me know. And if you guys enjoy it, I'll make sure to do more. But until then, enjoy the games. Alrighty, getting started with these first games here. I will say, I don't think I played the best of these games, but that's kind of what post-commentary is for. It's like, I can realize where I made these mistakes and point them out, which is kind of the cool part. But also, like, I usually pride myself on, like, playing better than the average Pocket player. But, I mean, for my first Pocket gameplay video, it's not going to look that great. Gonna keep it real with you guys. But, I mean, the deck still functions. The deck is still good. I will say, I don't know if I mentioned this in deck intro, but I took this to the win streak event, and I did win all 5 of my matches in a row on the first try. It was like the first day it did when I woke up that morning. It's like, well, I guess I'll give it a shot. And it was relatively easy. I beat like 2 Pikachus, 2 Gyarados, and a Vileplume deck, I think. So, definitely not like the easiest matchups, except for maybe the Vileplume, of course. I will say, I think putting down this Magikarp is a little too optimistic. I definitely shouldn't have done that. And I'm also thinking about whether to attach this energy to the Magikarp. Since I'm already whole energy attached ahead of Misty, and I'd be another one for going second, I think about it, and I'm like, well, if my opponent has their own Misty Gyarados in the back, then I definitely need to set up my Magikarp. And also, I'm so far ahead that, my opponent needs some good luck to swing their way to win this game back. They do drop the Starmie, though, which does make me feel inclined to believe that this probably isn't going to be, the deck. Also, I'm thinking about it more. I definitely put the Magikarp down because if my opponent plays a Sabrina, I know that I'd lose my Magikarp here, and that'd be one way I could lose this game. But I don't evolve the second Gyarados up because if my opponent ends up bossing that up, then I'm going to be in a struggle trying to get out of that situation. Because, Gyarados is a really high retreat cost. You really don't want to be in the Gyarados until it's ready to attack. Otherwise, it's going to soak up unnecessary hits. And it's going to remove the whole point of having that additional bulk anyways. But, we can just do the Chatot thing, draw a bunch of cards, refresh our hand. Really, the whole reason we're doing this whole Mimic stuff is mostly to draw into our Misties. Misty is by far the best card of the deck, unfortunately. Because sometimes Misty just straight up won't work. But, I mean, it's fine, because you have so much delayed setup. You have 2 Pokemon that will draw you a bunch of cards, and Gyarados can do his own thing. So I'm usually not too worried if I miss a Misty. That said, I really do want to hit at least 1 energy, especially if I'm going first. Because if I go first, I'm usually the energy behind, and I'm such an energy-starved deck that being behind on the energy is way worse than, not being able to evolve. Anyways, my opponent's going to go ahead and take down the Chatot, and they go ahead and put the damage on the Magikarp, which does have me a little bit concerned. I wish I could have had a different Chatot or even a Fossil in play at that point. But I really don't want to risk my opponent having Sabrina and losing my whole setup. So I decided to take this risk instead. And I think it'll pay off in the end. I even go ahead and just land an extra energy here. And thanks to the XP that I have in my hand from the Chatot, I'm able to retreat out. I would say the original version of this deck I saw played 5 fossils and 1 X speed. I was playing around with it a bit more, and like, it doesn't make sense to run the fossils over X speed outside of the tanky reasons. Like, it would have been nice, obviously, if I could have had it down, but, you know, in this case right here, it's like, well, what am I expected to do? I just have to put down the Magikarp. I don't think having, like, a Dome Fossil over an XP would have been better. And I think the XPs have their utility. Like, they allow you to retreat out in the Chatot, start using that attack, or even, like, save on prizes. So, like, here, I was able to, you know, retreat out into my Magikarp here. And I don't know if I would have been able to do that. That was an extra Dome Fossil, if that was a Dome Fossil instead of an X-Speed. So I definitely run 2 X-Speeds over 5 Fossils any day of the week. I've definitely just found it to have better results. And most of the time, it isn't going to matter, right? You just dump your XPs anyways. So if you know you're in a good position, like, oh, my Chatot has an energy on it, my Gyarados in the back is already being charged up. If they don't knock out the Chatot, I can still retreat. And that's where, like, that's where it's like, okay, you just dump the XPs and move on. I actually don't think I do this a lot in either of these games, but typically I'm just playing my supporters. Like, if I know the Giovanni isn't going to be relevant in the matchup, I'll just play the Giovanni. That way I don't have to see it again. It wastes my supporter turn. So if I don't have another impactful supporter to play, I'd rather just discard it. Anyways, my opponent's going to get bossed up into Stormy here and lose the game. Also, you'll have to excuse my language for the people who only play Pocket. I might say something that sounds like a term, but you'll probably be confused. So I just said I bossed up the Sabrina, and that's because in regular TCG, that type of effect where you pull a Pokemon from the bench into the active is usually referred by bossing or gusting, and that's because the main card that does it is called Boss's Orders. We'll be gonna get a card in the next set like that under Cyrus, who's way more similar to Boss's Orders than Sabrina is. Because Boss's Orders specifically lets you choose up a target, where the Sabrina is just like you push them away. It's the same deal, right? But I figured I might as well clarify that because I might be saying some stuff that might be foreign to some Pocket players. But you know, I'm here to bridge the gap or something along the lines of that. Here, I'm just going to go ahead and play the Oak and, you know, try to get the Chatot here. I know I have the guaranteed Chatot since I have the other Magikarp in my hand. And ultimately, I want 2 Chatots on the field as opposed to anything else. Having the Fossils is okay, and then having double Magikarp is kind of, like, suspicious. Just because the Magikarps are so vulnerable to everything. Like, if my opponent had a boss with the Eggy here, they could kill my Magikarp, and I'd get punished for that. Which would definitely suck a lot. Also, I want to note that the deck only plays 1 Professor Oak, is for pretty similar, like, for a pretty crazy reason, and that, like, well, if you have, sorry, the reason for that is that, I'm blanking, why can't I not speak properly? What is happening to me? Oh, the reason for that is that if you are constantly shuffling your hand back into the deck, drawing 2 cards is not going to be the incremental value you think it is. So Oak is not like a super mandatory card in the game or in the deck. We like it because it lets us get a little bit further into the deck, and sometimes it'll allow me to play like an extra X-Speed or Old Amber. But the value that you get off the Oak only lasts for that turn because you typically chat out your hand away. Also, no clue why I put this Magikarp down. I want to say the reason is I saw my opponent play 1 Sabrina already, and it's like, oh, well that means they'll have less gusting options in the future. And that would be true if I was immediately going to Gyarados this turn. So if I was immediately going to Gyarados, this wouldn't matter. I'd have a Chatot and a Magikarp on my bench, and that would mean that my opponent only has 1 Sabrina left. So even if they boss up one of my other dudes and knock it out, they can't boss up my last one. But here, I'm going to my Chatot anyways, because I have to, like, find a way to draw into this Gyarados. So really, putting this Magikarp down is kind of bad. At least on this turn. I could have considered it for this turn instead, because there's legitimate reasons to putting it down to draw further, but I should have pulled that trigger so early, before I even saw like what the rest of my hand was. Because if I ended up drawing into a Gyarados here, then I probably wouldn't even be mimicking. I'd probably just go ahead, evolve into my Gyarados, and be kind of set. But now it's like, okay, well, it's fine. That said, like I said, if I had not put that Magikarp down before, I would probably put it down there just to make sure that I can make sure that like I'm safe from Boss's Order or Sabrina onto my Magikarp. But yeah. Also, I would prefer to have a Fossil down too, but my hand was very tight. My opponent didn't have a lot of cards in their hand, so I couldn't bank on much. Thankfully, the Chatot just barely gets me there and gets me back into my Gyarados. So that's exactly what's going to happen. I'm going to go into Gyarados. And now I just have to kind of pray that my opponent doesn't have a Sabrina in their hand. Thankfully, like, they haven't been drawing too hot. They've been just mostly evolving. So I don't know what's, like, mostly in their hand. It could be, like, Sabrinas or XPs or something along the lines of that. And I hope it is, because, like I said, this is not a great position for me. Outside of having my attacker energy, which is good. The Giovanni shouldn't matter in this matchup, because there's nothing that I can really swing into. So I'm just going to go ahead and play it. I always kind of like trimming my hand down with unnecessary cards to make their red card feel worse. Not that I've seen a red card in the past month or so, but, it's something I like to keep track of at the very least. The only time I won't play something is when I know my hand is really bad, and I'm like, oh no, I have 5 cards in my hand, you should definitely red card me, and try to get something better out of that. I think it's the only time where I'd actually, like, not play stuff out. But typically, like, if I don't need the card, I don't need to have it there. And there's no reason to, not play it. Especially like a Giovanni, where it takes up my supporter for the turn, so it's much harder to dump later. Obviously, I can't go back to my Chatots because they're both dead, but, the details. And here, I'm going to be looking to be in a pretty good position. Since my opponent lost their Superior, they won't be able to retreat this Executor out very easily. They could manually attach to it and XP out, but they can't really XP into anything without sacrificing a whole lot. So, and they wouldn't even get their attachment for the turn because, they have to attach. They could still play Leaf, but I don't think this deck plays a Leaf. So, it is what it is. Also, there's the possibility that my Gyarados just knocked an energy off their side of the field, which would basically close out the game, even more so than it already is. My opponent just really has no options here. Even, like, going to Leaf and then moving into the Celebi would still cause them to lose the game. So, Gyarados scams out yet another victory. And then I have one last game here. I believe this is against a... What was this against? Oh, it was against Mewtwo. Mewtwo's like kind of one of those decks that I feel like I farm really easily, because Mewtwo has a decent amount of card draw. The only issue is that, like, if they, play a bunch of supporters early on and then also evolve quickly up while also putting down other Pokemon, that could definitely make my Chatot worse. And, that is the one issue with this deck, is, like, your opponent can technically outplay around the draws. It'll definitely make them feel a bit worse because they might be overcommitting a little bit too much onto the field, or playing out cards they don't necessarily need to play out. But, for all intents and purposes, my opponent can play out, or can, like, play around the Chatot to some degree. That said, because my deck has so many dud cards, using the Chatot to thin out more dud cards in the deck will just further improve my Chatot draws. So the longer that you give my deck, the better it ultimately ends up becoming. And even the other late game scaling decks, like, I guess, like, Celebi kinda counts. Can't really keep up. The only thing that can kind of keep up with this, like I said, is like Charizard EX in the late game. And that's only because they could knock out the Gyarados super easily. And I think their ramp is slightly faster than ours. They just have a little bit less safety and consistency in their setup, I believe. The other deck that can kind of outpace this one is Pikachu, but that's just because Pikachu is so strong, man. If they have any of the, like, cheaper attackers, they could go ahead and knock out the active. I actually can't think of anything that does, like, 1 energy and 40 damage for lightning that they play. Like, obviously there's the electric. Oh, Zimstrika's a bitch. Zimstrika sucks so much. So if they end up going first, and they evolve the Zimstrika and just kill your Magikarp, it's like, okay, what do you do? At that point, in that matchup, you have to bench 2 Magikarps, and then you're only getting 1 Chatot. You just kind of have to hope and pray you get the Gyarados really quickly. So that matchup isn't fun. It's still definitely doable, especially if they're not playing the Zimstrika package. They might be playing like Electrode or even the Raichu stuff. But Thankfully, the Raichu can't even knock you out, so it's like, good on us. We're just gonna go ahead and greenly set up. I keep getting the Sabrinas into my hand, and I keep thinking about playing the Sabrinas. And the only reason I don't is because I'd actually much rather kill the Mew that's in the active. And my setup is kind of fine enough. It's like, I don't need the Misty. I'm pretty comfortably. The only cards I really feel like I need are the Giovanni that I'm gonna need to kill the Mewtwo later. And then I would also like my Misties, obviously. But I've got my Gyarados, I have the Giovanni, and now I'm pretty set up. Like, I don't even technically have to use the Gyarados, or not the Gyarados, the Chatot attack anymore. So, that'd be my takeaway from this. My opponent is going to go ahead and retreat out into the Mewtwo. Just so they can start attacking and maybe taking some prize cards. Maybe put some pressure on me to start winning the game. So that's where I'm like, okay, well, it's time to, start moving along with all this stuff. Like I said, I'm in a really good spot. I really don't have to do much here. I have double Misty. The only thing I'm kind of missing is an X-Speed, and I might have played both of them already. I might have lost track of that. But we're just going to go ahead. We actually flip enough damage here. And I would, normally you would go in and attack here, but I ultimately don't do that. Which I think is the correct play. I don't think you send in the Gyarados here just to have it get smacked, because there's a possibility the opponent could then go Giovanni for side drive, and then suddenly side shot on Mew kills me. That said, clicking Mimic here is definitely a misplay. I don't know why I did that, because I need the Giovanni for next turn, so it's why am I digging for more in the deck for my one-of? There's a chance I put it back in the deck, and, it's a very small chance I wouldn't draw back into it, but it's still I'm stupid. Why am I doing this? Regardless. As long as my opponent does anything here, I'm in a good spot because I can retreat, I can X-Speed. Life is good. I'll just go ahead and just retreat here. I really don't have a use for this energy on the Chatot, and removing it from play does mean... Oh, actually, is that the correct play? I'm thinking about it more. Maybe I should just X-Speed it out, but I think I'd rather do it later. So let's just say Gyarados has... what's it called? Let's just say Gyarados does his attack, he loses his energy, and then he'll be at 3 energy, and then your opponent springs you into one of the other Pokemon, and they don't kill it, you'll have a hard time retreating out after that point without the X-Speed. So I think it's better to save the X-Speed here. Obviously, Ragnarok would kind of suck, but I don't think my opponent's playing red card. Chatot of all decks definitely shouldn't, or not Chatot. Mewtwo of all decks definitely shouldn't be playing red card, just because they actually struggle to have all the deck space they want for Bunny Adventures. But yeah, that's one of my favorite decks. I play it for the 5 win streak event. I hope you guys enjoy the videos. Make sure to tell me in the comments if you guys actually enjoy this stuff. If you do, I'll keep doing it. But until then, I will see you guys around later. Peace.